I'll be honest, everybody. I was stunned. I did not have Maalik Murphy to Oregon State in my mind. I talked about him on this show as a good candidate for Auburn. I thought about him as a guy who could go to Miami. He played Miami this year and did well. I didn't see any of it coming. Carter Bahns, 24/7 Sports and Oregon State aficionado, joining me here on the show. And this is about as newsworthy of a move, non-realignment based, as Oregon State has had in the last 365 days. There are a lot of reasons to like this. Number one, got to be a breath of fresh air and energy and oxygen to that Oregon State fan base that had a lot of it sucked out of them this year in a 5-7 campaign that started 4-1. You upgrade a position that was a glaring weakness all year long. You get the top available transfer quarterback, in my view, since John Mateer was already at Oklahoma. This says a lot about Trent Bray and Oregon State, Carter. And if you're a Beaver fan and you're excited, I'm here to tell you, you should be.
It's the first good news Oregon State's had in a long time. Like you said, it is a breath of fresh air in Corvallis, and one that I think Oregon State needed early in the offseason to kind of quell the negative momentum that came with missing a bowl game. Obviously you had that big Wazoo win late in the season, but to close the regular season on a loss, you miss a bowl game. You've got a couple of defensive guys transferring out. You kind of needed a win. And I think they got one in Murphy that can attract a couple of more transfers in, can keep some of those guys on board that maybe would leave later in the window or head out in the spring. I mean, we've seen guys, Damian Martinez comes to mind, commit to the program in the winter and then leave in the spring. Maybe having a standout quarterback like that keeps guys like that on board who might pick up interest from other schools. So I think the momentum shift and kind of the signal that, hey, next season you've got something to look forward to. I think that's big to get that this early in the offseason.
Yeah, and it just, he's got 2 years of eligibility left. I don't think it's crazy, Carter, to see him as a starter in Corvallis in 25 and 26, because you look at his arm and his physical traits. Yeah, he could project into the NFL at some point. He's about to go to a team, though, that isn't going to be on everybody's radar in a significant way, the way he would have been at Miami or Auburn or even Kentucky, which is another place where he took a visit. And then he's going to go to a system that isn't going to ask him to do even as much passing as he did this past year at Duke, where he had a great season. He was around 60% completion. He had a single season record for Duke touchdown passes this year. Like, he just did so many things right. And there are a couple questions that I have on this move that we'll get to in just a sec. But this is just such a huge pull for Oregon State to say that this guy went around to SEC schools and decided, I want to go to Corvallis. I want to go be Oregon State's quarterback for at least 1 year, maybe even 2. I think that speaks volumes about what Trent Bray is capable of doing from a talent standpoint and what he has already done since Jonathan Smith left.
Not only that, but from an NIL perspective, like, I don't know the numbers here, but to go and compete against SEC programs and to pull him from an ACC program, like, you've got the reaction nationally that I've seen from fans is, this is a step down. Why is he doing this? Like, why would you go to Oregon State over an SEC school? Why would you even leave Duke to go to Oregon State? Like, props to Oregon State's NIL department, props to Trent Bray for what he's built, props to Kevin Gunderson for the offense and his recruiting ability, because Oregon State just went toe-to-toe with a Kentucky team that's desperate for a quarterback that has whiffed 2 years in a row in the portal, an Auburn team that's going all in the portal, top 5 in the team portal recruiting rankings, and that needs quarterbacks, probably going to take 2 this cycle. They already have Jackson Arnold. And then they
took Ashton Daniels as well from Stanford.
Okay, yeah, there's the second one. And then, to go and get him from a Power 4 program in Duke. Like, obviously, I don't think this is a tampering situation. Oregon State was going into Duke and being like, hey, we're going to give you this offer, come play for us, because there was a period of about.
By the way, even if it was, who cares?
Yeah, but I think
serious question. If anyone out there hears, well, so and so tampered with, I got news for you. Every major college football program tampers at some level. It's
Yeah.
happened before. Tampering can be something as innocent as you send a kid a text a day before he enters the portal when he's already got plans to. That could be tampering and what. But
Mhm.
everybody's doing this stuff. I really don't care.
And this, I think, could be part of the reason. We don't know the full story here yet. I'm sure, once he gets on Corvallis, once he gets in Corvallis, once he talks to the media, some of this will come to light as it did with DJ a couple of years ago. Duke, from the time that Maalik Murphy entered the portal to the time that Duke had a replacement in place, one day, I think 48 hours max, Darian Mensah was at Duke as a commit, one of the top portal quarterbacks out there. It makes you think maybe this was always in the cards, that Duke was kicking the tires on bringing someone in who they thought could bring something new to their offense, because Maalik Murphy, I'm not going to call him a statue quarterback, but he can make throws on the move, but he finished with negative rushing yards on the year. They're not going to run design running packages for him. Darian Mensah, on the other hand, very mobile, someone who can, maybe bring something to the Duke offense that they weren't getting from Murphy. Maybe they were kicking tires on quarterbacks. Murphy saw the writing on the wall and said, let's get out of here. If that's the case, again, regardless of why he left Duke, the fact that Oregon State's going head to head with some of these programs that, with rev sharing coming down the line, with NIL being what it is in the SEC, like to go win a recruitment like that is impressive. No matter how you cut it.
I don't think Murphy is somebody who comes in and suddenly you talk about Oregon State as we did Washington State this year, which is, hey, if they go 11-1 with a tight Power 4 loss or a good, Boise State loss or something like that, could they get into the college football playoff? I don't think Oregon State can do that in 1 year's time. Could they do it in 2 years' time when the Pac-12 is theoretically rebuilt to 8 teams and at least has a conference championship to dangle as a resume builder to be one of the highest ranked G5 teams in all of college football? Yes, I think that's absolutely possible, and why I mentioned the 2 years component earlier. But let's look at the other side of this, Carter. This is just a huge move. The branding that it brings to Oregon State, the fact they went toe-to-toe with those teams, the NIL, it's all big, it all matters. Here are the questions I have. Duke had one of the most underrated wide receiving cores in all of college football. Duke was one of the most underrated teams in all of college football, who were 6-1 in one possession games, by the way, with Maalik Murphy at the helm. But Eli Pankel and Jordan Moore, those were a couple of really capable wideouts. And Oregon State's receiving core, I think, was one of those areas you looked at this season and said, boy, they need help. They need a lot of help in there. Where do you feel like reinforcements could come from?
They have 2 guys coming back that I feel really good about being strong weapons with Murphy. One, Trent Walker, a guy who is a possession first with sneaky speed, who I think can be that guy in the middle of the field that Murphy finds most of the time. He's probably going to be your leading receiver.
River Craycraft.
Yeah. Or like here's a name out of the hat, a Timmy Hernandez type at Oregon State a handful of years ago. Possession first. He's always open. He doesn't drop passes. Like, that's Trent Walker. I think he is probably the go-to target for Maalik Murphy. And then Darius Clemens was someone who, when he came in as a transfer from Michigan, you felt like maybe he was going to be the guy. Took him a while to get healthy. He finally gets in the rotation, kind of underperforms. And then the Boise State game happens. And it feels like he's got all this momentum going into the offseason. And then he announces he's coming back. This is a former blue chip recruit who, get him in the open field, you let Maalik Murphy air it out. Maybe he's your big play guy. He's got some size to him as well. Maybe he can win some contested catches downfield. Maalik Murphy's got that arm. Maybe you see him thrive in a kind of an aired out scheme. So those 2 guys, I think, will benefit a ton from this move. And to an extent, Oregon State's passing game struggled because of its receivers. But if you bring in a quarterback who's better than what you had this year, maybe the quarterback elevates the receivers. So I think these things can kind of work hand in hand to where it's mutually beneficial for the receivers and the quarterback, and the passing game as a whole just takes a step up because you've got a better quarterback.
Yeah, and he's rumored to be favored as a Florida target, but a West Coast receiver who I would love to see at Oregon State is J. Michael Sturdivant, the transfer from UCLA. I mean, if you put him in there with Clemens and Walker, then I think you got some. But that piece on the outside, I think, is still missing for this offense to reach its full potential. But of course, what Oregon State runs is all rooted in the run game. So the offensive line, I think, had some moments this year. I don't think they struggled as much as the defensive line, but that's not saying a whole heck of a lot. How do you feel about that unit as it stands right now?
Well, it's going to be different. I mean, you lose Josh Gray, who set, I believe, the career record for starts or consecutive starts, or one of those, if not both, at Oregon State at left tackle, and then moved into guard. Going to be shifting guys around on the interior. It's a unit that when Jim Mahalichek was leading it as the position coach, you knew that it was going to be good year in and year out because he's such a good talent identifier and developer. Now that you have a new staff in and you're starting to lose the guys that Mahalichek brought in, this is kind of the prove it time for the offensive line, which has been probably the strength of the Oregon State football roster for the last 5 years, maybe longer. Like, I think that has to be a concern. The running backs are good. Like Anthony Hankerson, we saw this year, one of the more underrated running backs in the country as far as his yardage, his touchdowns. He was among the national leaders. And then Saladin Allah, who was your third stringer, steps up with Jam Griffin out. I think that two-headed monster can be yet another prolific backfield for Oregon State and take some of the pressure off of Maalik Murphy. But will it be as good if the offensive line's not as good? So now that the pieces are starting to fall into place, you've got your quarterback. I think you make a good point bringing up the offensive line, which we're not usually talking about in mid-December. I think that is now maybe the question of the offense.
Carter Bahns, 24/7 Sports, and Beaver aficionado. Carter, enjoy it as always, my man.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.